Dear colleagues, I'm happy to be with you today to discuss about the neurological manifestation of Sjögren syndrome. It's a difficult topic because it's quite rare, and also we are not sure that every neurological symptoms are due to Sjögren syndrome. For example, when you have a headache or other classical neurological symptoms with Sjögren syndrome, you are not sure that it's due to the Sjögren syndrome. The second problem is that the Zika syndrome and the Sjögren syndrome is not like on this slide. It's quite rare to have a very severe Zika syndrome in our patients, especially in neurological patients. And we never seen this type of patient with very severe feature, including Raynaud syndromes or parotidomegalia. The neurological manifestation of Sjögren syndromes are encompassed about 20% of cases of the whole Sjögren syndrome, and we can classify the different cases into PNS involvement, CNS involvement, and sometimes autonomic nervous system, but it's quite rare. And the repartition is about 2/3 for peripheral nervous systems and 1/3 to central nervous systems. But it's quite different to one study to another. And first, I propose to begin by the most frequent involvement, that is peripheral nervous system. Here you can see the different studies on focused on neurosjögren, and you see on the second column the frequency of neurological involvement. It may be, depending on the study, 8% in the less frequent numbers to 66% in the most frequent. And when you see the differences between CNS and PNS, it's also quite different from one study to another, but sometimes it's 50-50 and sometimes it's the predominant involvement is on PNS. The PNS is also include also different involvement. Here in the study we published when I was in Lille. And you can see the repartition of the different PNS involvement. The most frequent involvement is sensorimotor neuropathies, but pure sensory neuropathy with ataxia is also relatively frequent, and the cranial nerve involvement may be 1/3 of the case, for example, in our study with Sophie Delalande in 2004. If we do the total of the different manifestations, you can see that the more frequent cases are sensorimotor neuropathy in around 50% of cases. If we consider now the different type of peripheral neuropathies, we have 4 different features. The most frequent is the axonal polyneuropathies with distal hypoesthesia, without important ataxia, and frequently with a low motor deficit. And the electromyography show reductions of sensory and motor amplitude, but it's more axonal involvement rather than demyelinating. The second group of neuropathy is sensory neuropathy with ataxia. This ataxia is associated with balance problems and is due to ganglial neuropathy. And we have frequently a severe sensorial deficit in these patients that have a lot of difficulties to use to walk and to use their hand. And on the electromyography, the pattern is less impressive compared with axonal polyneuropathy, but we have frequently a reduction of sensory amplitudes. The other manifestations are less frequent, but one relatively frequent feature may be the small fibers neuropathy. This neuropathy is associated with dysesthesia, with pain, with burns, and with distal allodynia, but without ataxia or motor deficit. And the quality of life for these patients are very difficult, and the diagnosis is also difficult because we don't have a lot of exams to confirm the diagnosis. We have the cutaneous reflex and also the cutaneous biopsia, but it's difficult to be sure that we have a small fibers neuropathy because electromyography is less frequently impaired. We also have some laser evoked potentials, but we did not perform this test in Strasbourg, and also the pseudoscan. The two last peripheral manifestations are less frequent. It may be multiple mononeuropathy with vasculitis, and also some demyelinating polyneuropathy with motor and sensory neuropathy. These two pathologies may be confirmed by the electromyography. If we try to classify the different neuropathies regarding the clinical presentation and the evolutions, we have some difficulties to clearly evaluate the treatment possibilities because of the lack of any phase 3 trials on this different feature. But we can begin by the symptomatic treatments, and especially the treatment of pain, and we can use amitriptyline or pregabalin or gabapentin. But these treatments have sometimes secondary side effects, and we frequently use also additional and alternative therapies like TENS, hypnose or yoga. If we look at the immunoactive treatments, we have a lot of treatments that have been tried in these patients, but unfortunately, once again, we don't have any clear proof, and it's not evidence-based medicine therapies. Sorry, for the hydroxychloroquine, we just have an effect on peripheral symptoms, but not on neurological symptoms. So we don't use hydroxychloroquine for our patients with neurological symptoms. Regarding the corticosteroids, we have some good results, especially in multiple neuropathies or cranial nerve neuropathies. It's less good for the pure sensory neuropathies or the ataxic neuropathies, but it's a first-line therapy in the majority of patients. And in case of no response with corticosteroids, we used immunoglobulin, IV immunoglobulin lines, but it's only based on case report, and we don't have a control study. In a short series of a couple of patients, we can see that improvement is observed in 50% of the patients, but more frequently on ataxic patients. And we have currently a phase 3 studies, which is called TINIS in France, and it's in progress. We have included 1/3 of the patients, and Strasbourg is the coordinator centers. It's a second-line therapy or sometimes first-line therapy for painful neuropathies, but we have to confirm this interest in phase 3 studies. You can see on this slide the percentage of response of corticosteroids and IVIG in the different cases of neuropathies, and you can see that painful and ataxic neuropathies are more responders to IVIG, and multiple mononeuritis and cranial nerve neuritis are more responders to corticosteroids, but we very rarely used IVIG for cranial nerve involvement. On the second study by a Riston collaborator, you can see that once again the sensory motor on ataxic neuropathy are more frequently responders to IVIG, but we have also some poor response on ataxic neuropathy. Concerning the oral immunosuppressor, we can use methotrexate, leflunomide, azathioprine or mycophenolate mofetil, but the effect is more on Zika syndrome rather than to the neurological symptoms, and we prefer in the neurological practice to use corticosteroids and IVIG. If we look at the biotherapies, once again it's more efficacious for fatigue or salivary reflux, but in our experience the effect on the improvement of neuropathies is more frequent on multiple mononeuropathies rather than pure sensory neuropathies or painful or ataxic neuropathies. So if we propose to look at the intensity and the evolution of the different form of neuropathy, you can see on this slide that the effect of corticosteroids is more interesting on multiple mononeuropathies or cranial nerve neuropathies, and IVIG is more frequently used to painful and ataxic neuropathies. Now I would like to spend a few minutes on CNS problems. We have a lot of discussion. We had a lot of discussion between the association of central nervous system involvement and primary Sjögren's syndrome, because some authors say that it's an accidental association, and some others that it's associated. You can see here in several studies the different manifestations, but I think that some of them are clearly associated to Sjögren's syndrome, including acute myelopathies or optic neuritis, but some others like epilepsy or cephalalgia are more discussing. The association is more not sure in these cases. Here you can see some MRI of patients with some inflammatory lesions in Sjögren's syndrome, here with relatively diffuse inflammatory lesion with atrophy. Here you can see some gray matter involvement, especially here on thalamus, and here also some other damage, probably due to vascular events. Here you can see diffused white matter involvement, and here vasculitis associated with Sjögren's syndrome. The most frequent CNS involvement in my experience is myelopathy, acute myelitis, frequently associated with neuromyelitis optica, with optic nerve defect. And you can see here a very large myelitis on the sagittal plane, but also on the axial plane. Regarding the evolutions, we have around 78% of disability in CNS involvement compared with 25% on PNS. So you can see that the CNS involvement is more disable compared with PNS. And regarding the treatment of the CNS, we have around 45% of response in patients regarding the corticosteroid treatment, but we have also some good response with cyclophosphamide. But once again, like for PNS, we don't have randomized phase 3 trials. It's only case report and little series of cases. But we have also a good experience recently in our department on the IVIG treatment on encephalitis associated with Sjögren's syndrome. In conclusion, I would like to underline the importance of the evocation of Sjögren's syndrome in several clinical neurological manifestations, especially acute and chronic myelitis, including neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorders. The second group is focal or multifocal CNS with encephalitis, optic neuritis, or SEP-like syndrome. The third most frequent group is sensory ataxic and painful neuropathies, and also not so rare, the cranial nerves with the 8th, 5th, or 7th cranial nerves that is relatively frequently involved in Sjögren's syndrome. But unfortunately, once again, we don't have any evidence-based medicine medications for this type of manifestations, and we need absolutely to put together the efforts for the treatment and the follow-up of the patients with the neurologist, the rheumatologist, and also the internal medicine doctors. Thank you for your attention.